Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind of Marie. Today's guest is a truly remarkable individual who seamlessly blends adventure, philosophy, and philanthropy. Jeff Rasley is the author of several books, including Godless, Living a Valuable Life Beyond Beliefs, and You Have to Get Lost Before You Can Be Found. He is also the president of two foundations, the Scientech Foundation of Indiana, which supports STEAM education, and the Bassa Village Foundation, which has transformed a remote community in the Nepal Himalayas. Jeff, it's truly an honor to have you here today. So just let me give you a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Saad. It's wonderful to be with you.
So, my first question is, what inspired you to write about living a meaningful life beyond traditional religious frameworks? And what do you hope readers will take away from that?
Well, I was a lawyer, um, and I was rather um, dissatisfied with certain aspects of the law, which, its aim is to do justice, and it didn't seem like it was doing that in many cases. So I decided mid career to go to seminary, and I had been brought up in the Presbyterian church. So I went through the process of becoming a Presbyterian minister. So studied the Bible and theology and history of church and that sort of thing very deeply. And in doing so, realized I was not really a Presbyterian and only in a ethical sense a Christian, and had become what I describe as an agnostic animist. And so I did not become a Presbyterian minister stuck with the law, but began writing about my own spiritual theological journey, which kind of paralleled actual sort of adventure travel journeys that I was also doing at that time in my life.
So, can you share a pivotal moment from your journey that profoundly changed your perspective?
Yeah. Um, so I had turned 40 and I was manifesting what my wife accurately described as midlife crisis symptoms. And one day she slapped down a brochure in front of me on the table and said, "Why don't you go do this?" And it was a brochure about trekking the Mount Everest Base Camp Trail. And so a friend of mine here in Indianapolis and I went off to Nepal and we did that. And I really just fell in love with the Himalayan mountains, in which living in Indiana, it's not exactly a lot of mountains around here since our high point in the state is about 700 feet high. But and the other thing is I was really touched by the strength, but not just the physical strength, but the sort of delightful spiritual strength and kindness, friendliness of people that live in the high Himalayas. And so I wanted to go back and eventually started leading expeditions and eventually started the foundation, the Bassa Village Foundation, in a remote area of Nepal, with connecting with a particular village. And so, yeah, I would say that that was fairly pivotal.
So, what first drew you to Bassa Village? And was it just that experience, or was there something more specific that happened there? And what has been the most rewarding part of the work there?
In 2006, I had hooked up with an outfitter company, which was owned and staffed by people from Bassa. This was 11 years after I had started going to Nepal and had been using a different outfitter company, but for various reasons, we didn't connect that year. I connected with this one, and it was a really grueling and challenging experience we had. At one point, the Sirdar, which is the head guide, and I were alone in a blizzard coming down off a mountain that just the two of us had ended up climbing together. And, that kind of experience really bonds you with people. And I really enjoyed the company of the people from Bassa that we were working with. And So when we got back to Kathmandu, the owner of the company, whose name is Niru Rai, asked me if I could either donate or raise $5,000 to add 2 grades, a 4th and a 5th grade, to their little village school, which had only 3 grades. And $5,000, that would build, add 2 classrooms, and it would pay the salaries of 2 teachers for 3 years. So, of course, I agreed and brought in a number of friends in fundraising, and we ended up organizing the foundation, and since then, we've done a lot of infrastructure projects, and Nehru formed an NGO in Nepal, and so the 2 sister foundations work with the local people to develop the infrastructure work we've done there since then.
Wow, that is really amazing. That is just really inspiring to hear. So that kind of leads me to my next question. Why do you feel that a collaborative approach is so important to the foundation's mission?
Yeah, I do. It's essential, and Nehru and I agreed on this in our very first conversation when we went beyond the school project to the next one was a hydroelectric project. And what we had decided was the way to prevent there becoming a kind of welfare dependency attitude developed in the village was that we would only do projects that the village requested, and then the villagers would have to do all the construction work themselves, and they would own the project. It would not be, owned or run by outsiders. So, for example, they created their own school board. They created a utility board, which runs their hydroelectric system, their water system. And the village, which is a really beautiful thing to experience, when they're working out how to work with us on a project, they hold a meeting and everybody in the village gathers together. And they will sit and talk for as long as it takes to work out every single detail of how they're going to build this. And a new school since then, and other health center, et cetera, and then down to which kids will carry the food, to the men, stringing the hydroelectric wires up a sheer rock face. I mean, every little detail they just work out on their own, and so, of course, they take ownership of it, um, and, it's worked really well, and that's sort of been really a tenet of the philosophy of community development that I have developed since then, and which I've actually taught at 2 different universities.
I totally agree with that. Coming in to help them with the supports and then letting them have ownership of their decisions is really the most empowering thing you can do. So that's really beautiful. How do you see the mission of the Scientech Foundation, particularly its focus on underprivileged girls, connecting with your work in Bossa Village?
Well, the 2 different foundations that I'm the president of really are completely different and separate. The Bassa Village Foundation, we work in Nepal. The Scientech Foundation of Indiana, we work in Indiana. But the Scientech Foundation has been particularly concerned with encouraging girls and young women to go into the STEAM areas, because those are areas that have been underforced in terms of women. And so we think it's a good thing to encourage women to consider education and then careers in those fields. And so we've financially supported, which has 2 different programs, one that goes through the school year and then one that's in the summer, that introduces girls into the STEAM fields. And we've also supported Girl Scouts, which here in central Indiana has a really cool science bus that they take around and do science demonstrations to their local Girl Scout troops. And then a number of the other programs that we financially support are not exclusively for girls, but they encourage girls to join. Most of them have a majority of boys or young men involved, but they're all actively recruiting girls and young women, and that's one of our priorities when we consider a grant application.
That's awesome for opening doors for STEAM opportunities. In your opinion, why is confidence so crucial for young girls or really anyone pursuing careers in STEAM?
Yeah, I mean, I think, developing your confidence, which I also pair that with resilience, is important just to become a full human being. Our the way we can live in a developed country and community can be so easy. We can entertain ourselves through a screen all day long. We don't have to get outside to be stimulated. So, programs um, that require kids to get outdoors, to use their hands, to have to think through something creatively, I think is just important for a person to become, a full human being. It's kind of a catchphrase to reach your full potential, but otherwise, it's just so easy to sit back and live through that screen.
I agree with that. Can you share one or two wisdoms from the book that you believe are particularly relevant to the work you do with both foundations?
Yeah, the book is entitled 72 Wisdoms, and the vast majority of those come from sources other than me. And then there's a bunch of sort of sub wisdoms within the 72. But one that I'll quote that is my own it goes something like this: live your life like you are creating a beautiful work of art. And the reason I mentioned that one is because it tracks with what we were talking about, about becoming fully human, developing your full potential. And, what I mean is every day, be conscious about what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and make it beautiful. Don't just sit back there and, like I said before, live through your screen where other people are leading you down a path. Create your own path and be conscious about what you're creating and make it beautiful.
Completely agree with that. In both your books and your humanitarian work, you seem to blend philosophical ideas with real world action. How do you reconcile those two aspects of your life?
Well, I think they reflect sort of a true aspect of what we as human beings are. There's the vita contemplativa, to put it in Latin, the life of the mind, the life of spirit, life of thinking and feeling. And then there's the vita activa, which is doing, being active in the world, making a difference. I think the people who are the most effective in terms of doing really worthwhile things, leading valuable lives, are also people who are philosophical, who've thought about what they're doing and have decided that they want to lead meaningful lives. You don't get to that place, you don't make that kind of a commitment without being contemplative about it and figuring out, well, what is a meaningful life? Socrates said that essential question for each person to answer is, what is a good life? And so I think if you do that, then you shouldn't just sit there and be pleased with yourself that you came up with this wonderful philosophical idea or understanding. And then you have to go out and implement it, do something with it, be that good person leading a meaningful life.
I absolutely agree with everything you just said. There's 2 words I talk about a lot on my show, and that is introspecting and really coming to terms with what impact you wanna leave. And until you really spend the time introspecting to find out who you are and what you stand for, it's very hard to visualize what that good look life could look like because you're misdirected. So until you do that time to sit down and sort of sort out what that life looks like for you so you can make a plan to make the steps toward it, you're kinda just lost in the world, and so that's absolutely true.
Yep. Yep. Right on.
What current projects, such as commercial co op business in the Bassa Village, are you most excited about right now, and what impact do you hope that they will have?
Well, on the Bossa Village Foundation, that what you mentioned is really interesting and exciting. So when Niru and I worked out our plan for working with the Bassa community, we had thought it would never have a commercial aspect. It would just develop basic infrastructure, um, utilities. Eventually, we realized that that wasn't sufficient in a community that's entirely dependent on the weather because the whole village is based on subsistence farming. So you have a bad year, people are going to starve. And the only jobs that people in Bassa have available to them is working in the trucking industry to be porters, guides, cooks. So in 2015, there were 2 terrible earthquakes in Nepal, which basically shut down the trucking industry, and then, and that lasted for over a year, and then COVID hit, in 2020, 2021, that shut it down again. So, it really opened our eyes to the need to develop some kind of commercial enterprise where the villagers could have some way of making money and creating food other than what they grew. And so we, you know, put it to them and they came up with pig and goat raising. And so the foundation has funded the purchase of sort of the starting stock. Piglets and goats, and we've now done our second round of purchase, adding to the herd, and, we're not sure how many years we'll need to purchase more animals, but at some point, hopefully, it'll be self-sufficient, the animals will be reproducing sufficient numbers that the yogurt and milk that the goats are producing and the meat that the pigs are producing will be sustainable, and it won't be as of course, it'll still somewhat be dependent on weather, but it won't be as dependent as the crops are.
Those are some unique ways to approach things, so that's always awesome. How do you manage the demands of leading 2 foundations and still finding time to write?
Well, think of myself as a very disciplined person. When I was going through school, I was not only going through school and trying to get good grades and, be committed to academics. I also played sports all the time and I worked. I just, grew up and went all the way through college and law school and seminary with this very sort of busy life that I had to be disciplined about scheduling. And I still am, even though I'm retired from the law. So I really have, more time to work with at this stage of my life than I ever had before. So middle to late afternoon is my writing time. And in the morning, I actually go out and usually play pickleball or work out or swim, and then spend a few hours doing the foundation work. Then I do my writing, and then I have the evening to just do whatever the hell I feel like.
That's the best way to do it, gotta have your block time for you. Looking ahead, what's next for you both in your writing and your philanthropic life?
Well, I'm working on 2 books currently. One is with my wife, who's also a writer and actually a more accomplished writer than me. We're working on a book about small towns in Indiana, and when COVID started, to be able to do something for fun, we just started visiting small towns around Indiana, and we've now visited over 250, and we research each one, write up a bit about it, take a bunch of photographs, and we're slowly working that into a book. And then the book that I'm writing right now um, is based on my experience of working with a lawyer when I was in law school who was considered the hottest, most celebrated criminal defense attorney in the Midwest. He had a bunch of high profile cases, and I got to, participate as his law clerk. But it's a rise and fall story because after he achieved this fame and fortune, his life took a dark turn. He became a cocaine addict, got divorced, went bankrupt, eventually fled the country. And so it's a fictionalized version of my experience with him and then about his life. But it's not an actual biography, but it's inspired by him, who was a wonderful mentor and teacher for me, but whose life really took a dark turn. But he's, come out of it, and he's a teacher in Greece and seems to have a good life over there. It turns out uplifting in the end.
Well, that's always good when you can, see something start one way and work through some storms to be a better, more beautiful outcome. And the story with your wife, that adventure project sounds like that's just really an awesome way to interact and engage and work together with you both being wordsmiths. So kudos on that. And
Thanks.
that's really all the questions I had for you today. So I just want to let you know that it's been a pleasure hearing from you. And your work is a testament to the power of combining purpose with action. So I commend you highly for that. For our listeners who want to learn more about you and your foundation, where can they find information about that?
Well, both foundations have their own websites. So the BASA Foundation is BVF USA .org, and the Scientech Foundation is scientechfoundation.org. And then I have my own website, which is my full name, jeffreyrasley.com. So any of those three places, and then I also have an author, um, website or author page on, Amazon, where you could access, books and my bio. Yeah, so I'd be delighted for any of your listeners to connect with me.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time. And everybody, I'll have his links in the show notes so you can check those out later.